All right, it's the Security Weekly News special holiday edition for 2024. We're off enjoying the holidays with the Security Weekly crew in an alley off the Port Authority, but I hope you are all enjoying the holidays and having a festive time. I'd gotten this idea that we should talk a little bit about tariffs today, not political. So I don't want to talk about political stuff, but we want to talk a little bit about the impacts of tariffs. So I went and found somebody smart to talk about it. And Josh is one of the smartest people I know. And I know some really smart people. And so Josh and I are going to talk a little bit about tariffs on the Security Weekly News.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
From the Security Weekly Vault, it's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week. Your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for the Security Weekly News. Well, from the island of Elba, it's snowing here. I'm Doug White. Be safe out there. Don't share needles. All that stuff you need to know for a good family holiday. You know, just whatever makes you happy. Oh, tariffs. Oh, Tannenbaum. You know, well, I know. So I have an MBA, and my major when I was in school for that was international economics and microeconomics. And microeconomics like calculus with extra umami. So I at least can understand. You know, I mean, it is.
Stealing that. That's good.
Yeah. I mean, that's all it was. You know, the first time I took microeconomics in grad school, it was just literally like the whole thing was just calc. I mean, it was like, wow, this is cool. So I thought we could talk a little bit about the impacts of technology. So there's been a lot of talk in the political spectrum, and I'm not really particularly interested in politics, and we aren't going to talk about that or the players or anything like that. But all the different leaders of the United States from the last, decade plus have had this thing about tariffs. And I thought we should talk about this from a CISO perspective and what some of the impacts might be. So I have Josh here, who's an expert on just about everything. Hi, Josh.
I'm an expert on a few things, but I read a lot. So, it helps.
Yeah. I mean, reading always helps.
You read a lot too. And you're one of the smartest people I know. You actually are Dr. Doug. Let's be honest here. Okay.
Yeah,
you have a doctorate. It is not easy to get a doctorate. Everybody I've talked to is like, if you want a doctorate, you need to be a masochist first.
Well, yeah, that's the fun part.
No comment.
No,
anyway.
I was just before the show. I was telling the crew. I was on a dissertation defense yesterday, and I was like, there were only a little bit of tears, and I was like, it's not a defense unless there's tears. I mean, come on. And don't put me on your committee if you don't want suffering. I mean, are you literally going to come tell me that, this is going to work? I'm like, no, it's not. You're a liar, a filthy liar. Don't tell me that you didn't do a horns test, you pathetic worm. No.
Oh dear. I can only imagine. And it's hilariously funny imagining that. But, and I'm not a doctor, but back when I was in accelerators, Mach 37, they did what they call murder boards. And so they would act as the CEO, CFO of a company you're trying to sell your new product to. And so they'd ask questions and they'd interrupt each other, and you were expected to answer all the questions in some vague semblance of order.
I've done that on not the defense part. I've done it. We used to do murder boards for congressional testimony, and I just to hit people with the most crazy questions and stuff that these idiots were going to ask them. I know you're trying to fund a nuclear reactor, son, but what do you think about a teapot museum in the state of Mississippi? Just because they would ask stuff like that just to get it on the record. And it was just like, what are you going to do when they start this crap?
Oh, yeah, no. And they made people cry. We're talking about new entrepreneurs. Oh, yeah. They made people cry. And when you do media training, which we did media training, I've done media training several times in my life. It's absolutely terrifying. The stupidity that can come out of that stuff. You're like, your teapot museum story or question is not off base. I have been asked weirder questions.
That was a real one. That actually happened. I don't remember what state.
Okay. God.
Yeah, I don't remember what state it was, but it was like that. And the presentation was about radioactive xenon embrittlement and this guy asked something like that. Yeah.
Well, we can test the teapots for embrittlement if there's any radioactive sources nearby, Senator. It's not a problem.
But yeah, so yeah, doctoral defenses can be a bit onerous. It depends on who's out there, and if you're just for all you doctoral students who are listening, plan your committees carefully, and that's where politics gets involved, because you have to be sure the people in your committee are going to do the right thing at the right time, because you need that, because you never know when a person's going to show up at your committee and going to start on something, and you're going to end up trying to defend why you didn't use eigenvalues greater than one methodology, and you actually used the Horns test. And that's when you want to go, Lou, could you please just stomp her a little bit? And Lou would go, let me explain something to you. You're an idiot. And because Lou could take them all down. I mean, he didn't want to. He had on his mirrored sunglasses sitting there like, and you didn't want to wake him up, but if you needed to, you wake him up. And
all right, let's get back to tariffs.
I know. Anyway, okay, so tariffs are a mechanism that have been around forever, and you put tariffs on things to basically prevent those things. So if you want to stop something from happening, you want to stop the import of tea from somewhere, right, you put a massive tariff on tea. And basically what will happen is, it's just simple economics, is the price of tea will go through the roof, and no one will be able to afford tea, and they will start drinking coffee because you really wanted them to drink coffee. I mean, this is an example that there's a macroeconomic concept, but I mean, there was an example they used. They said, you want to promote the drinking of tea. You don't want people are drinking coffee. You don't want people drinking tea. So you slap massive tariffs of 100%, 200%, 500%, whatever it takes, so that only a very, very tiny number of people can actually afford to buy tea. And therefore, people will go, well, what do I drink now? And maybe they drink coffee, maybe they drink wine, maybe they buy, Bacardi, whatever you want. And of course, there's always a lot of pressure from various industries to force things to go their way. And so there are these huge political aspects of tariffs and everything else, and there's all kinds of finagling. But in technology, what we've seen, starting with President Donald Trump back in his first term in 2016, continued by the Biden administration for the next 4 years, and now has been talked a lot about. And I don't want to get it. I'm not saying they're right or wrong. I'm just saying they're doing it. We've heard a lot of talk about putting tariffs on all foreign products. Now, the idea, I mean, the conceptual idea of this, of course, is to force industries to develop in the United States. So unlike tea, which maybe you can't even grow here, you could conceptually make motherboards, you could conceptually make transistors, capacitors, CPUs, whatever, in the United States. You could set up factories, you could hire workers to work in those factories, and that's sort of and you could technically protect those goods as well, because they're manufactured right here in Ohio or wherever. And
but
there's a painful process to get there if you don't already have the goods. So it's kind of like the coffee and tea thing. If you want to grow coffee, you when you go to the farms and you say, we're going to have to tear your tea farm out and we're going to put a coffee farm in instead, it's going to be a painful process. And so what do you think, Josh?
Well,
for tech.
So for tech, and by the way, I want to bring out something that's interesting as an example that Americans can, our viewers can understand. Do you know why there's no small trucks in the U.S.? Why everybody idolizes those old Rangers and such? It's because of the chicken tax. Not a joke. That's what they called it. But one of the aspects of the chicken tax was any small truck, pickup truck that was imported into the U.S. had, I think, a 20 or 30% tariff. So the manufacturers stopped importing them because nobody was going to buy a small truck with the same price as a medium-sized truck. So they stopped importing them. So the reason you can't get a little truck to not spend $1 million at the gas pump transporting your 3 bales of hay or whatever is because of that tariff that was added on. And the companies that create the product in whatever country don't pay the tariff. You pay the tariff as the consumer. So if the price gets raised, they're not going to eat their profit margin. They're just going to pass the cost on to you.
Yeah.
And so you pay that tariff. So
if you take apart a computer, so if I took my desktop computer sitting here and took it apart, and mine's built out of parts, it's not a brand or anything. If all those parts there's probably no parts in this computer that were manufactured in the United States.
Right.
I mean,
Almost guaranteed.
And I mean, I
Yeah.
guess that's on me. I mean, I guess I could seek out American-made motherboards, but even American-made products are not necessarily American-made, right?
They might be American assembled.
Yeah, there you go. And so there's some rules about that, about what it takes to call something American made. And so I remember when I think it was Nissan, maybe it was Toyota. It was one of the Japanese car makers. They were assembling the cars in Nashville, Tennessee, I think, or somewhere around there. And so the car said American made, but all the parts for the car, for the most part, were made in Japan and China. And so that's tricky because, and then of course you start talking about supply chain stuff. And so this motherboard has all these different components on it, transistors, capacitors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And all those things are made somewhere. And it's probably not in the United States. So if there's a tariff on all that, and it's a cumulative tariff, it means from a tech perspective. I'm not trying to get into the politics of this. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but from a tech perspective, it means that motherboard that I bought. And I think this motherboard cost like $380 when I bought it.
Damn.
Well, it's a Republic of Gamers. It's a high-end
serious motherboard.
It supports my multiple video cards, and somebody else was paying for it. I was building it was a prototype I was building for somebody who was trying to build a massive gaming rig, and I got to keep the prototype. That was part of the deal. But
nice.
I mean, if that motherboard price goes from say $380, which you said wow, because you're used to what you buying, dinky motherboards, which I do too. If I'm building, like, depends on what I'm building. Yeah. I mean, if I was just building something to run Excel, like for my wife upstairs, I'm to buy, a $40 motherboard or something. But if it's for me, come on. But if the price of that went to say $3,000, I'm being silly and exaggerating, but it's not about politics. I'm not trying to tell you this is right or wrong. I don't want to get into that.
No.
I'm just saying the price of that motherboard goes way up. Well, guess what the price of computers is going to do when you need to buy new tech for next year, and you need to buy routers and you need to buy switches.
They're talking about a 30% tariff on electronics and other items. So your $380 motherboard would be $494.
Yeah,
that's not that's not insignificant.
But to be fair, I don't know that I wouldn't have bought that motherboard at $494.
That's fine.
I mean, in that particular project, I probably would have still bought it if that was the motherboard that I wanted, because it was one of those, cool projects where a guy says, I need a gaming rig.
Price no object.
I don't care what it costs. Can you build me a prototype and show me that it specs to a minimum, and then build me one, and I'll let you keep it was just some rich guy. And I mean, and I'm like, thanks, Kyle. And I'm like, I mean, in that case, it doesn't really matter, but it could have a huge impact on your organization when you talk about how many computers are we going to buy this year. So if you need to build 1,000 of these things or buy 1,000 of these things, that could get kind of pricey pretty fast.
Oh yeah, very, very fast. And it's awkward. You've got a significant issue here because it's at the highest level. Can you, do you want to spend this much more money for the 1,000 of them that you're buying? It'll put you over budget. And at the lowest level, I want to buy one, whatever. I want a smartwatch. I want an access point. I want a laptop. I want a tablet for my kid. Well, it's not a $100 tablet anymore. Now it's more. And sometimes you have to make choices about what you're buying. It's going to turn us as technology enthusiasts. I mean, I'm already planning, hey, let me go buy a couple of single board computers like Raspberry Pis or similar, because I want to get in before the tariff hits. By the way, if you're outside of technology, I just heard this the other day. If you're doing any work on your house, go buy the wood and all of the equipment now, because the tariffs are going to hit the imports. We import most of our lumber.
We import everything. We don't. Do we actually make? Is there anything made in the United States?
No, there is. There's a lot of things made in the United States.
What do we
make? We assemble cars. No.
No, I mean, I'm curious. I don't know. I'm in the service industry. Come on.
Because of the CHIPS Act, we are starting to see more chip fabs in the United States. Those are the photolithography fabs and such. We do manufacture some of the top machining in the world. If you want something very quality machinist made, you do it here in the U.S., bar none. Okay, we have the top machinists in the world, as far as I know. We have
guitars. We make guitars.
We make guitars. We have
because, like, I know that if you buy a Paul Reed Smith guitar, they have ones that are made in the United States that cost $3,000. They have ones that are made in, I think, Japan that cost like $2,000, and then they have ones that are made in China that cost like $500.
But that's actually a great analogy. If you want the high quality, you buy it from here in the U.S. If you want, there are some Chinese manufacturers that are upping their quality game. There are some Japanese manufacturers that have always upped their quality game. Spyderco knives, you get them made out of Seki City in Japan, and it's like, oh my God, it's amazingly good. Okay, actually, the one I have in my pocket, I think, is one of those. But so if you want the high quality items, you buy U.S. made. If you want, or the companies. Yeah, or the companies in other countries that have upped their standards. Oh, is that compliance again? To be U.S. standards, and then you're fine. I mean, what's this expression we have? It's made out of pure Chinesium. Okay.
Now, when I was a kid, this is interesting. When I was a little kid, if something said "made in Japan" on it, it was junk.
Right.
That changed.
Oh, but significantly.
There was nothing made in China when I was a little kid, but Japan was where they made all the cheap toys and all the kind of, because my uncle used to bring us cheap toys he flew to Japan in the Air Force, and he would bring back all these toys, and they were just like junk. They were fun, but they were junk.
Well, do you know that there was a city, I think in Japan, named USA. Okay. And they named the city USA so they could actually say made in USA, USA. Mm. And so, this is an American toy. No, it's not. It was made in USA, Japan. I don't know if it's still there.
That's funny,
but that's a true story. Yeah, it's a true story. So, like, you've got the ability to buy high quality stuff. But let me ask you a question: out of the things that you buy on a regular basis, would you pay an extra quality fee to buy a lot of it? Or, I mean, like clothes these days, what do they call it? Fast casual or fast fashion? Not fast casual is eating. Sorry, fast fashion. People buy off Temu and Wish and AliExpress and all these stores. So Macy's, which is a chain of high quality clothing that's been around forever and a day, they've closed a significant chunk of their stores, I believe. Okay, so it's do you want cheap and fast, or do you want quality and expensive? That's the trade-off. This is going to push people to buying less stuff. Presumably more quality, but definitely less stuff. Is that going to harm the economy?
It definitely has an impact. I mean, what do you think about, like, I mean, there's definitely a threat vector from this. Me, because it starts to turn into, I remember so many of the times when I was recommending things, a lot of them started with, you need to replace this, and as we talk about end of life products and things like that, because, like, for instance, right now I have a really low end computer that I just literally use for, like, it's used for web browsing, and it's just sitting upstairs, and I use it for, to do an Excel spreadsheet or something to look something up. And it costs like $300.
Right.
And as an organization, I probably have quite a few of those, but I can't upgrade that computer because Windows 10 is going to end of life it next year. And so because of the hardware, I can't upgrade it to Windows 11. Yeah. And I may upgrade it to Linux and just say, well, I could do the same stuff on Linux, and who cares? And I don't need to replace this. And so there are ways around this, but I mean, I could see this having an impact on our security budget because
your budget just got 30% lower.
Yeah,
30%
because
of
you're
the
going to have
value
to pay
of your
more, when you need to re-up that your firewall, or you're trying to replace that ancient PIX that you've had in there for 10 years.
Wait, I just thought of something. Are they going to put a tariff on licenses as well? I've bought the firewall, right? And I have a yearly license for upgrades, don't I? And support and such. I wonder if they're going to tariff license. I didn't even think about that. But if they tariff intellectual property licenses, your license cost just went up by 30%. Not quite as bad.
I don't know that they're going to do. I haven't
VMware,
seen that they're going to do that. But I mean, if they did, obviously the license would be more expensive. But at the same time, I don't know. That seems like a lot harder thing to control, because I could literally, there's a lot of ways around tariffs too. So I like we were talking before about assembling cars, there was these thresholds of where if if this many parts are actually, assembled on site in Alabama,
Right. Then it's
it's
made
an
in the USA.
American made product, and the tariff may not apply. So there are tariffs always have all these little nuances about supply chain. Where in the supply chain is the tariff applied? Is it applied to a car, or is it applied to the parts that go into the car? So is there a tariff on rubber tires, or is there just a tariff on cars? So like Singapore, I think, was where they used to have a huge tariff on foreign automobiles, and they didn't make any automobiles because they just didn't want people to drive. They wanted you to ride the bus.
Right.
And I think they had 100% tariff on cars. Because
Okay.
I remember one of my friends from Singapore talking about, I wanted to buy a car, but it was like double the, I was like, well, that's a pretty cheap car. And he's like, oh, not at home. It's like double. But if you had that, I don't know how those tariffs actually will be applied to technology. So I don't know if there's going to be a tariff on a device, on the components in the device, on the license for the device, and all that, or it's just one tariff that's going to be applied to that device. So I need to buy a new router, and there's a tariff applied to it. Now, again, I mean, tariffs are just designed to pressure. They're not cure-all panaceas. They don't cause quick change. They slowly bend things towards a different thing. So you want to suppress Chinese-made routers, and it doesn't happen overnight. I guess it could if you put a 10,000% tariff on something. But when you talk about a 30% tariff, it does raise the cost of those goods comparably. And you're obviously trying to make American-made products more competitive because, like I said, with the guitars, that Paul Reed Smith that was made here, or a Gibson custom shop that was made in Kalamazoo back when that was open, was way, way, way more expensive than something made in China.
Yeah.
There was a quality differential, but if you wanted to press people to buy that Gibson custom shop guitar rather than a Chinese knockoff, you put a big tariff on Chinese knockoff guitars and make the price comparable. And now people go, I guess I'll buy the custom shop guitar because they cost almost the same thing.
There's another aspect to this as well, though, and I want to bring that up for just a minute. Toyota, which is a foreign car company but has plants here in the U.S. to do exactly that, assembled in the U.S., blah, blah, blah stuff. And they're a good car company. Don't get me wrong. I drive a Toyota. There is a truck that they have that they've built that I want one so bad. It's scary because I want a little truck. But because of that chicken tax, they just came out with this truck. You can buy it in two-wheel or all-wheel drive, roll down windows. Like it's their basic small truck. Okay, it's selling for $10,000 to $15,000. You can buy a brand new truck for $10,000 to $15,000, just not in the U.S.
So I was looking up what a chicken tax is. I mean, why is it? I got what it is. I just wondered why it was called that.
I don't remember. It's something to do with importing chickens as well.
It was passed in 1964 by Lyndon Johnson.
Yep.
Always an interesting guy. But it just says as an unintended consequence.
Right.
So it's an example of a tariff that did things you didn't expect it to do, I guess.
Well, one of the unintended consequences is there are now products outside the U.S. for markets designed outside the U.S. that are not designed to be brought in the U.S. So there's actually markets outside the U.S. for products that will not be brought into the U.S. because of these tariffs, these taxes.
Like Happy Happies.
Happy Happies?
It's a Chinese-made car that's like... it's super cheap. It costs like $1,000, but it's so dangerous because if you like something bumps you, you die.
I saw somebody on YouTube bought like the least expensive truck on Temu or something, and it's an electric truck, and it looks like it looks like if you scaled up a toy. Like a child's toy made out of wood.
I've seen those. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
But he fit inside of it. He's driving around. He's like, "This is cool." And then it broke.
It's like a Reliant Robin. Come on.
Oh God! I don't know anybody else that knows about those things. For anybody that doesn't know
those things.
They're a three-wheeled car that would turn over every you'd make it turn too fast, and the car
it's literally
rolls.
It's got three wheels, and you steer it with a tiller like a sailboat. So you set up here in it, and you have this tiller that you try to steer it with, and there's a little teeny front wheel, and all you got to do is hit a pothole, and the whole thing flips over. A Reliant Robin. Well, I mean, I do think that these tariff things are complicated, and I think that for all of us that are working in technology, tariffs are tricky. They have unintended consequences, and the effects are not immediate. I think that's probably my most big point with it. You have to kind of plan ahead, but shifts like that don't happen overnight. So if you suddenly want there to be a whole new industry pop up, if your factories are sitting there empty, then yeah, that it might work. But if there are no factories and there are no trained workers, and then all of a sudden you put a big giant tariff on things, it's going to make some pain in the short run. So I think my point with this conversation, and we can continue talking about it, was that CISOs really need to be, I think, thinking about this, and this may become part of your asset management, where you have to think about the sort of, it's not an S bomb, but it's a kind of S bomb of, what components do we have in our organization that are going to be impacted by a change that in a very broad tariff, not just a tariff on, we don't want people bringing German beer into the United States.
Right.
We want you to drink American beer. You're going to drink Coors. You're not going to drink whatever. And it's going to be these broader taxes and tariffs have a huge impact on technology from many different perspectives, in terms of, okay, well, what will this do over the next 3 to 5 years? Because if it's going to have that kind of a change, what are the companies we need to focus on that are going to be able to provide us with the products we need at the price we want to pay?
So I think, Doug, that this is going to be an interesting thing. And I'm going to make a couple of predictions real quick, and I'm curious about yours as well. I don't think we're going to see a significant amount of technology manufacturing move into the U.S. due to cost. Okay.
Well, and other things.
Yeah, but we're talking about tech for right now. But I don't think we're going to see much technology manufacturing move to the U.S. What I do think we're going to see is very similar to what you talked about earlier, which is the assembled is made in the USA for cars. What happens if you take a firewall, take it apart to its component pieces, and ship each piece to the USA and have a very small assembly line of people who just screwed the damn thing together here in the US? Is that then a US product made from Chinese components?
Could be.
And so then it's made in the USA, not subject to the tariff? Do you know that, and this is very common, Converse sneakers are shipped with a layer of felt over the sole, because that way they're slippers. And there's no tariff. When they get to the US, they strip that off, send the felt back, put it on the next this is normal. So what ways are we going to see? Is Dr. Doug, going to become the American factor for half a dozen companies in China?
I sure as hell hope so.
They're going to ship everything. He will. He's willing to do so. Just FYI. Oh, damn. Okay. But is it something that we're going to see more of, that we're going to see more assembled in the U.S., made in the U.S., U.S. pieces made from non-U.S. components?
It probably would depend on what the law actually says.
Right.
I mean, when you write the tariff, like this chicken tax thing, I mean, when you write this, what does it actually, that's what I was talking about supply chain. What does it actually say? Is every individual component that's manufactured outside the United States tariffed, or is it just the finished product? And if it's a finished product, what constitutes a finished product? If it's shipped in pieces, can you bring in 50? I have no answers to these things, because I don't think anybody does at this point. But I do think that this has a kind of longer, impact, because that's the point of tariffs. Tariffs. Right. Point is long term. I mean, in economics. So this is not a short run solution to anything. A short run solution to this is a ban. A long run solution is a tariff, because you want to change the industry. You do not want people using Chinese made buggy whips. You want them to buy Amish made buggy whips in Pennsylvania. So you put a 10,000% tariff on Chinese made buggy whips, making them more expensive than a handmade Amish built buggy whip that you bought in, Pennsylvania. And that slowly will shift. This is the theory, that will slowly shift the industry to another, status, and it might cause more people to, and of course that industry could grow in the United States. This is not something that happens in a year. It's not something that happens in 4 years. It's something that happens long term. And of course, any economist will tell you what is long term. Beats me. It could be any frame of reference, and it can be very, very complicated. But there have always been tariffs. There are tons of tariffs already in existence, like this chicken tax thing. I don't know where this goes. I think my point of this conversation was for CISOs to be thinking about this in terms of what does it look like for you? Are you facing a massive, replacement of components in the next 2 years? Those components may cost significantly more than you expected because you have to replace every Windows 10 machine that you have with new hardware that will run Windows 11 or whatever it is you're trying to do. And I think you need to kind of keep that on, your front burner, because this is not going to be a quick process and it's not going to resolve itself quickly. And so you don't really know what form it will take. And it creates a lot of uncertainty in your financials, in the next 3 to 5 years.
Absolutely agreed.
And I mean, and that, and I'm, like I say, I'm not trying to get into the politics of whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just trying to look at it from a purely economic perspective, which means lots of math. And you just, there's no consequences in economics. Come on. It's only in the implementation. And so I don't know what it means, and I don't think anybody knows what it means, but it sure sounds good to a lot of people. I mean, when you talk about it, a lot of people love the way it sounds, because it's like, we're gonna force this back
Go
into
American.
the United States, USA kind of stuff. And I don't know that that's exactly how that resolves at all. I mean, if I did, I'd run for office and tell you my whole plan, and I'd, or actually, I would never run for office. God, can you?
Yeah,
I would run for CEO. I was I can live on a yacht in the Mediterranean and call in once a month. Sorry, CEOs. I'm just giving a very small subset.
In the short term, this is going to be painful. In the long term, this may have an effect that was desired. In the long term, it may have unintended effects. We'll see.
Or it may not do anything. I mean, It may not be painful. I mean, it may just literally be a finagle, and companies ship, like you said, now we wrap every Cisco router in a felt wrap, and it's no longer a router. It's now a slipper, and therefore not subject to the tariff. And then we get it inside the country, take the felt off, and it's a Cisco router. Made in the USA. We put a flag on the cover and we're good to go.
Yeah.
It's like, because I think always with these things, people always think laws get passed or any of this kind of stuff, and it just has an immediate effect. But the hard reality of it is that's not really true. And it's something that will be sorted out in the courts. It will be sorted out in the Congress over a long period of time. And economics itself is not immediate, but when you involve the government in it, it becomes even less immediate, because it just doesn't work the way that you think. It's a much slower process. It has a lot more pieces to it. And, the average time in a lot of states for a case to reach civil court is like 4 to 7 years. Because there's no constitutional guarantee of a fair and speedy trial.
Speedy trial, yeah, exactly.
That's not part of civil court. And so when a company says, I don't want to pay the chicken tax on these trucks, and they file a lawsuit in, I don't know, Arkansas, they have a lot of chickens there, and they say this is unfair, that goes to a local court, an appellate court, a state Supreme Court, maybe to the U.S. Supreme Court. That's 25 years before that case is ever heard, if it's ever heard at all. And and on and on and on. So I think these things are complex. And my point of this whole thing was to get you to think about it as a CISO, because it may have an effect on you in the immediate future, and it may not, but it's something you need to be aware of, and you need this in your asset list, I think. Josh?
I couldn't agree more. Just be ready, be understanding, and you might want to buy some hardware in the very near future, like the next couple of months.
I've certainly been buying up small things that I wanted, because I'm like, they're going to be a big tariff maybe in the next year on this stuff. And I know it's coming from China.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Thanks all of you for watching during this holiday season. Hopefully you're having a good time and not miserable, but it could go either way. Anyway, we will be seeing you in the next year with all new shows, and we've enjoyed being here this year. So happy holidays, and I'll see you next time on the Security Weekly News.